I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. What does it take to have a long marriage? These couples have the wisdom of experience.
What keeps us going through tough times is our faith and dedication to one another.
Plus, despite little fanfare, life issues get a big push in Albany. And we'll hear more about a pro-life activist's daring escape in China. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. It was a day to remember for couples across Brooklyn and Queens as the Brooklyn Diocese honored them for reaching some milestone anniversaries. The diocese held a special celebration for couples married 25, 30, 40, and 50 years and beyond. Men and women packed into Our Lady of Angels Church in Bay Ridge on Saturday. Of course, we had to ask them for their insight on what makes a successful marriage, and they listened as Bishop DeMarcio praised them for the examples they've set for future generations.
Today we come to honor you because you are our heroes and heroines. You are the heroes and heroines of marriage.
Today we invited all of those who are married 25, 40, 50, and even more to come to renew their vows, to have the opportunity to listen to God's word and to be encouraged in the state of matrimony.
It's difficult in our world today and in the church today, and I think anytime we can have models for people, it's a great benefit so that people can truly see what good married life looks like in everyday situations.
We need that example that you give us in the world today. An example, hopefully, that you give to your own children and grandchildren. An example needed in our society of commitment that is lifelong.
It can be done. We can have lifelong marriages in today's day and age when statistics say that 50% of the couples don't make it past the 5th anniversary. These couples come, they celebrate in front of God and with each other, being a testimony that it is possible to do it.
I think that everyone here's relationships lasted so long because when you want something bad enough, you just fight through it and make it work.
Miracles do happen in marriage, and that the difficulties of marriage, which are clearly part of human life, can be overcome because Jesus established marriage as a sacrament, as a sign of his presence in the commitment of a couple to live together for the rest of their life.
So we've been married for 25 years, and we've met in college. The key is to recognize that we're not perfect and to, forgive and at least try to forget, if not, forget initially.
If there's a decision to be made, we talk about it first, and when the opportunity comes, then one will make it, because we have talked about it already.
And she's a good cook.
What keeps us going through tough times is our faith and dedication to one another and our firm love.
I think so. The secret for the 50 years married is love, compassion, and fidelity. Respect is very important for the marriage.
Some days are going to be tough, some days are going to be easy, but just roll with the punches, have faith in God and a Blessed Mother.
Well, we hope that people see that marriage is possible, that it is a state of being gracious and before God, and that marriage itself is possible through the sacrament, and it gives them the strength and resources necessary to be happy, and that's what marriage is about. It is looking for lifelong happiness with someone else you love.
Oh, some very important lessons there. Congratulations to all the couples. We wish them many more years of happiness. Well, when we return, she once dated the UK Prime Minister, but eventually left behind that life of politics. We'll hear her story and get you caught up on the top headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. Attacks against Christians continue in parts of Africa. After last week's attack at a Presbyterian Bible school in Sudan, violence escalated at Christian services in 2 other African countries this weekend. First, 16 people were killed when gunmen opened fire at a service taking place on a university campus in northern Nigeria. Associated Press reports the attackers rode to the campus on motorcycles and threw soda cans filled with explosives inside the service. When people tried to escape, the attackers, who were waiting outside, shot them. In a separate attack in the region, 5 more people, including a pastor, were killed at a church in the region. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks, but AP reports they bear similarities to other attacks carried out by the Islamist group Boko Haram. Meantime, 1 person was killed and 15 others injured when someone threw a grenade into a church in Kenya. Now, I must warn you, some of what you are about to see is pretty graphic. Yesterday in Nairobi, a musician from the church told a South African website that he saw someone enter the church and threw what appeared to be a stone at the altar. He said he heard a blast and then everyone around him was covered in blood. Church members believe the attack may be related to an ongoing land dispute. The Vatican spokesman called the attacks in Nigeria and Kenya horrific and despicable and called on Christians in the region not to give in to the temptations of hate. A priest in Northern Ireland has asked for a sabbatical after mistakenly showing images of naked men to a group of parents. The incident took place at a grade school last month when the priest tried to make a PowerPoint presentation to the parents. The priest claimed he was not responsible for the images, but apologized for the hurt caused and his failure to check his presentation ahead of time. Parents said they were horrified by what they saw. The church reported the incident to police, who said that no crime had taken place. Cardinal Sean Brady also apologized and believes the priest had no advanced knowledge of the photos. Cardinal Brady says that a church investigation of computers used by the priest did not turn up any offensive images. He added that a computer stolen from the sacristy of the church since the incident was not part of that investigation. Back in this country, a state senator in California is sponsoring a bill that would make it more difficult for people in the state to receive treatment to change their sexual orientation. The measure targets doctors who offer the care to people with same-sex attraction. The bill would ban anyone under 18 from having the treatment and would require adults to obtain informed consent. Patients seeking treatment would need to sign a statement saying that having same-sex attraction is not a mental disorder. The statement would also inform them that efforts to change sexual orientation could be harmful. The head of the Pacific Justice Institute, which opposes the measure, calls it one of the most outrageous, speech-chilling bills we have ever seen in California. Pro-life activists in the United Kingdom criticizing the BBC over plans to broadcast a radio show live from an abortion clinic. The program's host says the purpose of the broadcast is not to weigh the merits of pro-life and pro-choice views. She tells the UK newspaper The Independent that the show intends to provide new insights into areas of British life. In a statement, the UK-based Pro-Life Alliance said the program will, quote, inevitably provide free advertising for the organization in question. A spokesperson for the group called the program biased support for the abortion lobby. Well, a former girlfriend of British Prime Minister David Cameron gave up politics for a much different life. The UK newspaper The Telegraph reports 44-year-old Laura Adshed is now known as Sister John Mary. She is a member of Regina Loudis Abbey in Connecticut, the same community where former actor Mother Dolores Hart is prioress. The paper says Adshed and Cameron dated for more than a year in the 1990s when both were working at the UK Conservative Party's central office. Adshed eventually moved to the U.S. and worked as an ad executive before deciding to join Regina Loudis Abbey in 2008. She shares her story in the new documentary about Mother Dolores Hart, God is the Bigger Elvis. The documentary gets its name from Hart, who as a young actress appeared with Elvis in 2 movies. Well, a special day for 9 young men as they were ordained as priests for the Pope's diocese. Pope Benedict ordained the men for the Diocese of Rome at Mass yesterday at St. Peter's Basilica. It took place on the World Day of Prayer for Vocations. Later, during his weekly Regina Caeli prayer, Benedict prayed that all young people will be attentive to the voice of God. And a message from the Vatican to priests around the world. Rome Reports has those details.
June 15th is the World Day of Prayer for the Sanctification of Clergy. So, in order to prepare, the prefect for the Congregation for the Clergy, Cardinal Mauro Piacenza, wrote to priests from all over the world to talk about living a saintly life and also the new evangelization. In the letter, Cardinal Piacenza reminds priests that to be saints, one must seek the holiness of other people. That process itself is something that must be worked at on a daily basis. He also talks about priests who have been, quote, personally and profoundly afflicted by the sins of some of our brothers. He goes on to say that, quote, a dark shadow of suspicion is cast over all the other fine priests who perform their ministry with honesty, integrity, and often with heroic self-sacrifice. The letter also talks about the Year of Faith, which begins in October of 2012. He calls on priests to reflect on the importance of why the Second Vatican Council was so key for the Church. Also about how catechism can be a tool for teaching the faith. And last but not least, he talked about the next synod on the new evangelization.
And finally, an encyclical from Pope John XXIII is getting praise from the founder of Wikipedia. Jimmy Wales is in Rome as a guest of the Pontifical Council for Social Sciences, which is examining Pope John's encyclical Pacem in Terris. Wales tells Catholic News Agency that some of the thinking by the Pope is, quote, quite modern and up to date. Wales was scheduled to speak today on the topic Wikipedia, Free Knowledge, and Peace. Pope John XXIII's Pacem in Terris discusses what is needed to build a foundation for global peace. Well, stay with us. There's more currents after the break. Coming up, activists converge on Albany to bring pro-life issues center stage. On Tuesday, pro-lifers head to the state capitol once again to greet like-minded legislators and make their voices heard. Participants plan to gather in an open area of the Legislative Office building to show all who attend the event, and yes, even the passers-by, the strength of the pro-life movement in New York State. Also on tap, keynote speakers addressing hot-button right-to-life legislation, including one aspect of the government's health care plan that is not as hotly debated as, say, the HHS contraception mandate or the Reproductive Health Act. However, it still raises critical concerns. At stake, a patient's right to life, among other issues. Burke Balch is the director of the Robert Powell Center for Medical Ethics at National Right to Life. I spoke to him earlier about Tuesday's event and about new involuntary euthanasia threats pending in the legislature. And Burke, you're part of the Lobby for Life Day, which is taking place tomorrow on Tuesday. Really quickly, will discussions on the HHS contraception mandate and the Reproductive Health Act be part of the agenda?
Well, the concern from the pro-life movement's perspective with the Health and Human Services mandate is that it sets a clear precedent that could, in President Obama's second term, clearly be used, and we suspect is intended, to require that organizations, even religious organizations, even organizations that have strong moral objections, would have to also pay for insurance for abortions for their employees, and we'll be emphasizing that grave danger. With regard to the Reproductive Health Act, this is a proposal in New York State that would essentially make it impossible for New York even to choose not to fund all abortions for whatever reason on demand for the full 9 months of pregnancy. It would make it impossible for New York ever to say that parents could be notified before their young minor children who perhaps have been even the victims of a predator, a sexual predator, and are being steered to have an abortion. They wouldn't even be allowed to be notified in any way. Would there be any opportunity for requirement for informed consent or any of these things? So it would be an absolute blank check for abortion, and we're certainly going to be rallying against that in New York, in Albany, tomorrow.
And Burke, really quickly also, they're planning to push that bill very shortly. It requires 38 senators' signatures on the petition in order for it to be successful. How do you advocate combating this particular action while you're there?
It's critically important for people to contact their senators and say, do not, repeat, do not sign the petition to impose this extremist pro-abortion policy that's in the Reproductive Health Act on New York State citizens.
Okay, now while you're there tomorrow, this is very interesting, very little discussed aspect of Obamacare. You recently wrote about and have been a longtime advocate of why we should not legalize assisted suicide, focusing on the euthanasia aspect of the Obama Health Care Act, which we hear so little about. What are the key sticking points?
Well, the great problem is people do not realize that the Obama health care law is actually one which will severely ration life-saving medical treatment. And the way that it will do it is it would prevent you, or limit your ability even to spend your own money to save your life or the lives of your family members. Here's how it would do it. There is an 18-member bureaucratic appointed board with the elusive name of the Independent Payment Advisory Board. And this board is directed under the law starting in 2015 to make recommendations to prevent Americans from being able to keep up even with the rate of medical inflation in their health, in what they would spend on health care. Now, we're not talking about government funds. We're not talking about tax funds. We're talking about people use of their own money. And the way this would be enforced is that the Department of Health and Human Services, the federal government, it would be given the authority to impose so-called efficiency and quality standards on doctors and other healthcare providers. And what does that mean? It means that they would be told, these are the circumstances in which you can give antibiotics. These are the circumstances in which you can order an MRI. These are the circumstances in which you can give somebody kidney dialysis or any other life-saving treatment. These would be practice edicts. And if a doctor dared to give treatment that was not authorized by these so-called efficiency and quality standards, that doctor would be disqualified from getting insurance reimbursements from any of the insurance policies, health insurance policies that every American would be required to hold. Mm-hmm. So it is a very grave way that we would be freezing the practice of American medicine. We would no longer be having advances in medicine. We would be limiting people's ability to get life-saving medical treatment, possibly even food and fluids under certain circumstances, assisted feeding. And this would all be decided by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., who would be forcing your doctors not to give you treatment because they'd say they don't want you to choose to spend too much of your own money to save your own life or the life of your family.
And Burke, I want to interject here, because what do you say to those people who say, well, what about the terminally ill or those that are in uncontrollable pain?
Well, our point is that someone who is terminally ill or someone who is in pain certainly should be able to get the treatment that will relieve their pain. They should certainly be able to get the assistance that will, if somebody, even if someone is terminally ill, all that means is that the projections are that you will ultimately die from a particular illness. We're often very bad about predicting exactly how long. I remember my mother was expected to die within 6 months, and she lived for 5 years when she had breast cancer. So this notion that we're going to deny people's life-saving treatment when they want it, when they choose it, we're going to potentially even deny them food and fluids that are medically assisted when they want it, because we're saying, oh, well, you're going to die anyway. Well, we're all going to die anyway, sooner or later. And who is to say that that extra 6 months or that extra couple of years of life is valueless simply because we expect the person to be terminally ill and die at the end of it?
Okay, Burke, thank you so much. Again, a very little discussed aspect of Obamacare. So I'm very interested to follow up with you on that and perhaps talk to you a little bit more in depth about it again soon. But thank you for taking the time to walk us through it today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, we'll certainly keep a close eye on that developing issue. Coming up next, how far would you go for a cause you believe in? We'll tell you how the life of one anti-abortion activist has taken a very dramatic turn. When we return, he may be in hiding, but a pro-life activist in China wants to remain in his homeland. And finally tonight, at a time when the right to life is at the center of a number of public debates here in the U.S., the story is much different in other countries. Take China, for example, where activists are making allegations of Orwellian proportions. Among the allegations, strict enforcement of a one-child policy, including forcing women pregnant with their second child to undergo an abortion. But some in China are not staying silent, including a blind activist, who managed to escape from house arrest last week. CNN's Stan Grant has more on that.
Free and with a harrowing tale to tell. I finally escaped. All the stories online about the brutal treatment I received from the authorities, I can personally testify they are true. The reality is even harsher than the stories that have been circulating.
Chen Guangcheng, a blind activist kept under Chinese police guard day and night for the last 18 months, has staged a bold escape. Now in hiding in Beijing, supporters say he's in a safe place.
They broke into my house and more than a dozen men assaulted my wife. They pinned her down and wrapped her in a blanket, beating and kicking her for hours. They also violently assaulted me.
Chen says he and his family were denied medical treatment. He accuses police of harassing his daughter. Chen says he was powerless.
They said, "We don't care about the law. We ignore the law. What can you do about it?" They repeatedly led people to my house to attack and rob us.
Chen Guangcheng is a self-trained lawyer. He defended the rights of poor village women against alleged forced abortion. He was targeted by Chinese authorities. After organising protests, Chen was arrested for disrupting traffic and other charges. He was jailed for 4 years. Since his release 18 months ago, his home has been vigorously guarded. This is what happened when we tried to visit him.
We've been stopped. We've been stopped.
Activists say Chen finally plotted his escape. For months, he lulled police into a false sense of security. Chen lay on his bed for hours, getting police used to his long absences. Then he made his break. Waiting for him at a nearby rendezvous, supporters and a car. They smuggled him into the vehicle and brought him to Beijing.
We learned that he had escaped and needed our help. That's why we went to pick him up and drove him to Beijing and kept him in a safe place.
He Pei-rong agreed to speak to us over Skype. She said she feared for Chen's safety, often bursting into tears. Within hours of this interview, He Pei-rong herself vanished. Other activists tell CNN she's been arrested.
I'm not concerned about my own safety. I hope they'll arrest me, not my friends. When Chen told me he wants to stay in China, I told myself I'll be willing to stand by him no matter what happens next. Chen also said, as long as he's not free, no other Chinese will feel safe.
Activists say after discovering Chen missing, police moved in on his family and there was a violent scuffle in the village. Chinese authorities have not responded to CNN's calls for any comment, but to the Communist Party, Chen is a criminal, an enemy of the state. For now, Chen is free, but he is a man still in fear.
My worry is only deepening. My wife, mother, and children are still in their evil hands.
Chen finished his statement with an appeal to Premier Wen to no longer ignore his suffering.
What a dramatic story. According to reports, Chen may be hiding in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. Both the embassy and Chinese officials are silent on that matter. Speculation on his whereabouts comes just days ahead of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's arrival in Beijing. Well, that is all for this edition of Currents. Tomorrow night, with health care at the center of national debate, a church close to home honors doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. You can also follow us on Twitter and catch up with us on Facebook. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faubles. Thank you for watching and have a good night. I'm Liz Faubles. Tonight on Currents, honoring healthcare professionals. A cardinal is on hand for the special celebration. We'll have that and the rest of the day's headlines tonight on Currents.